if you're fresh, new into real estate, you're going to have to use one of the 5 pillars of wealth creation to build wealth. And these 5 pillars are it's network, time, money, knowledge, and deal flow.
Welcome to The Real Deal, a commercial real estate investing podcast. I'm your host, Aman Shahi. There's a ton going on in the world right now, and much of it impacts real estate investors. The Real Deal podcast will take a look at what's happening and how it influences you as a real estate investor. Each episode is a 20-minute segment dedicated to distilling the day's most important news, so you can stay up to date on what's going on in the world and how it might affect the commercial real estate market.
Welcome back to another episode of the Cashflow Capitalist Show. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Paul Thompson. Hey Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
So tell us about you in 30 seconds, who you are.
I'm a recovering corporate engineer, corporate drone turned real estate investor, and now podcast host and fund manager. And I just can't help myself but get involved in all sorts of new businesses.
So what do you mean by recovering?
Good question.
That's a deep question.
Yeah. So I'm trained as an engineer. I have a degree as an engineer. And so I happened to be good at math and science. And so I've found a way to use that as a way to parlay that into a workable, marketable skill set that made me a decent income. And once I got into the corporate world, I realized that I was not terribly fulfilled and rewarded by the corporate environment, but I didn't really know what else to do. And so it took me a while to figure out a reason to branch out and basically bet on myself and start my own company. And that was a moment on a beach vacation where I was not allowed to extend my vacation. I had every reason and opportunity to do so, but I couldn't because my boss just said, "No, we don't do that. You can't stay longer. Like you cannot work from the beach and let your kids play on the beach. You have to come back and be butt in chair. And we don't do that sort of remote work thing here." This was in 2015. And at the time, I worked for an internet service provider, and we made the very technology that allows, conference calls to work. And I spent all day in my office on conference calls anyway, but they wanted to see me butt in chair. And I thought, well, thank you for the wake-up call, because you obviously don't really care about me and you don't care about my years of service. I'm not as important to you as I thought, and I wanted to find a way out.
So that's what you said really right. Like they put a limit around you that you cannot do this, you cannot do that. You had no control over your life.
Yep.
So that's exactly one of the motivational factor for you to leave from corporate America, start into real estate. So correct. When was the first time when you invested in real estate, and which property was that?
So in 2015, I bought a house, a single family house, a 3-bedroom, 1-bath in Little Rock, Arkansas, where I'm from, where I live. And I bought it for $30,000 and put $10,000 into it, and it rented for $650. So as investment experiments go, it was on the smaller side, but it proved to me the idea that I can buy, fix a property up, refi, and then or rent it and then refinance it back out and get all of my money back. And when I did that, I thought, okay, this proof of concept worked, and let me do that again. And I did that on average once a month for the next 2 years.
So you're also working on different Fortune 500 companies, mostly employees. They make like good amount of money, like $150K around there. And
yep.
How hard it is to leave the job, making that much of money and getting into real estate, starting a new career from scratch?
Yeah. So if you're, a 6-figure employee and you're trying to replace your day job, you have to go and find something that's viable to replace that income and probably the lifestyle that you created for you and your family. And real estate can do it, but it takes quite a bit of work. In my case, I bought something like 25 or 30, I can't remember exactly, rental properties. And that was enough to cover my basic living expenses, but it wasn't enough for me to live any sort of lavish lifestyle at all. But it gave me a baseline level 1 financial independence that gave me the confidence to realize that if I didn't have to go back to work anymore, that I could spend my time working on a business, doing something else that's related to real estate. And so about 2 years into my 3-year plan, they laid me off. And so basically I'd walked up to the edge of the cliff and they pushed me off the edge before I decided to jump. But I had enough confidence that I had been building for the last 2 years in my ability to acquire and find good deals in real estate that I was ready. So in 2017, I did not go back to find another 9-to-5 W-2 type job. And I've been a self-employed person since then.
So what was the reason to lay you off?
Good question. It couldn't be because of me in any way whatsoever, right? Obviously, I'm such a good employee that there's no way they should lay me off. I don't know. It's the the cold equations of corporate America. Sometimes there's acquisitions and you get new employees, and you get new bosses, and they don't know who you are, and maybe they want all their staff to be in Georgia and you're in Arkansas, and okay, well, we don't want those guys in Arkansas. I don't know. They didn't share with me the details.
Sometimes values don't align.
Right. Maybe I made too much. I've been on that side of the equation far more than I care to admit, where you're told that we need a reduction of forces and you're a director and you look at all your employees. You may have 150 employees and they tell you need to cut 10%. And so you do your best to cut open requisitions so that you're not actually cutting a real person. But sooner or later, you're in a position where you have to cut people. Sometimes you cut the non-performers. Sometimes you cut people who make the most because they tell you that you need to cut so much in dollars.
Yeah. That's what I try to tell people. Don't depend on your employer. You can work so much hard work, and in the end, they will just replace you right away.
Yep.
You work for Fortune 500 company. I did also work for Fortune 500 companies, but you never know about your employer.
Right.
They can leave you. They can leave you hanging at any moment. You just have to. You are on your own for your own survival.
Right, and there's a fundamental flaw in an employee who works for an employer. What they're doing is they're renting their time, and they're doing an exchange of value, a 1-for-1. So they share or give up an hour for an exchange of some sort of dollar figure. But when that dollar figure is done and that hour is done, you don't get any additional value. Whereas in a lot of cases, if you're developing code or you're creating processes, the company is getting a one for many value because you're writing some sort of software code that they could use for years to come. So they're getting compound results from your 1-to-1 exchange of value. And that's why I think we all should be buying equity or owning equity or building equity so that we have a 1-to-many transaction. We need to go out and create our own economy and control something that is ours that we get they have the potential for a compound return on.
Yeah. And so you were working in IT. Did any kind of engineering mind help you getting into real estate? Or was that all total motivation from the limits by the employer?
Good question. So I think having a logical construct, going through engineering school and learning how to, calculate things is useful when you're going to something that's finance related. So in the real estate world, the mathematics of it is actually quite simple. Probably the most complicated, concept that you're dealing with is the time value of money. But for everything else, it's pretty much, you're really just talking about addition and subtraction. It's a pretty simple set of calculations. So for an engineer, that's not scary. So a lot of people who are good at math see the logic behind the value in investing in rental properties.
And as you know, like nowadays we have a chat GPT and all this thing. Are you using AI? Because you were a software engineer. I'm pretty sure like you use AI in many things. Are you using AI in any kind of marketing or any kind of like creating newsletters or anything?
Yes, almost daily. So I do create a newsletter. I do create content. I have I mean, I have a conversation with some version of an AI almost daily. I run a lot of ideas by AI, and it's usually just a starting point. Rarely, if ever, do I just say, ask a question of an AI and then take the results and then use it verbatim. That's not the point necessarily, but it does speed up the process of brainstorming and getting some ideas on paper that I may or may not come up on my own. And if I did come up with my own, it would take a much longer time to draft them. Yeah. So it's a really good way to get a rough draft of an idea, and then you take it and make it your own. And then I use AI to run it through Grammarly, to run it through a grammar check. Yeah. And then I run it through another AI to make sure there's AI detection going on it, so it doesn't look like I'm really using an AI. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm embracing the wave of AI. It's coming.
Yeah. So what are the other tools are you using in AI, like Grammarly, ChatGPT? What else that can also use it?
I use video.ai, which takes, I can record this kind of conversation, and I'll take snippets of this and put it into this platform, and it will take 1 minute snippets of it and create graphics around it and create subtitles. And so that's a really good starting point for creating short form video. And then I'll go through and make sure that the subtitles are accurate and they're kind of placed the same way. So I might do a little bit of tweak to it, but something that may take hours, you can do in a few minutes with little tools like that.
Nice. Another question for the engineering, because when I meet some engineer who are in real estate, I ask the same question to everybody else. Engineering doesn't teach you any kind of people skill. Mostly engineers are introvert.
Right.
How do you overcome that when you go out in a conference or meet up, that you have to talk, you have to speak? How do you overcome at that point?
That's a really good question. So I am a natural introvert. I'm probably more comfortable behind a computer trying to figure out a problem than I am in front of a person trying to get to know them. And so I have actively worked very hard at being better at the kind of the softer skills of social interaction. And I've gone through several training programs on how to speak better. I've practiced public speeches, and the way I tend to work at a conference is I try to be one of the speakers, because it's much easier to get to know people if you're in the front of the room with a microphone speaking and saying something that you've prepared. And then afterwards, people naturally come up to you and say, "Hey, Paul, I really enjoyed your conversation, or your presentation. I'd like to have a conversation. Would you like to grab a drink, or would you kind of ask you a few questions? Can I pick your brain? Whatever." So I'm basically kind of hacking the situation to make them come to me versus me having to kind of elbow my way in and be super charming and make some sort of clever, witty banter, which I'm not good at. So I kind of turn the tables and create an environment where I'm more comfortable, because I'm much more comfortable in smaller settings and with fewer people at a time. So when people come and talk to me, I can say, "Oh, well, let's step aside and let's have a conversation." They already know my story because I just shared it on stage.
Yeah. So you're doing the reverse engineering.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally, exactly. And so you also have a podcast. Is it The Wake Up Call?
Yes.
Can you explain something about it? Can you tell
Yeah,
us?
So I've had a couple of different podcasts, and they've had a variety of different purposes. And you'll probably realize that, and you probably find this for anybody listening to this, podcasts can be a bit derivative. It's hard to come up with something clever or unique in a podcast world. If you see anybody who goes around on the podcast circuit, they get asked the same questions over and over again. What's your story? What's your situation? And I'm working really hard to create a conversation that's very casual, but also extremely personal and intimate with the guests. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to elicit their wake-up call, which I define as a new piece of information that changed their life. It was a pivot point in their life where they realized that they were going about life all wrong. They had a health scare. They had somebody in their family pass away, and they gained a new perspective because of circumstances in their life, and they afterwards behaved differently. And so I'm looking for that story, because I think nearly every one of us has that story in our life We're like, oh man, I was, when I was 20, I was so dumb. And I got new information and now I do things differently. And I'm trying to mine that story out of people. And you'll find that people use the phraseology of the wake up call. I had a big aha moment. I had an epiphany quite a bit. And that is just a fun way of looking at the world and looking for these aha moments in people's lives to use them as some sort of analogous story to see if maybe you need to have a wake up call in your life.
Got it. So you motivate people about they can also invest, they can also start a new career anytime in their life.
Right.
Just wake up.
Right. Wake up. Right. Hey, hello. See, and the thing is that we all think we have it all figured out until we don't. And then we realize something new and like, oh, and we remember these stories or we remember these lessons via stories. And so I can tell you to wake up all day, but you won't unless you hear a story that resonates with you. And when that story resonates with you, it can be a call to action, wake up call that makes you think, you know what, that guy, that person, that lady had a wake up call similar to my life, and maybe I should have one too.
You just need a breakthrough. As Tony Robbins says.
Right, a breakthrough.
You never know. Yeah, a breakthrough. So you also have a business in hard money lending. Can you tell us something about that? How did you start it?
Yeah, so I started investing in real estate and I went to a bunch of conferences and I learned all these different techniques. And one of these techniques was using your IRA or solo 401k to get better returns. And one of the things you can do inside of those type of accounts is lend your money as a private money lender to other real estate investors who are doing projects. And so I started doing that out of my IRA and it grew quite a bit. And as a result of that, I thought, this is the kind of business I really like. I like being somebody who's looking at deals, but I'm not sure I really, really want to be the person doing all the deals. That's a lot of work. And I found that was an interesting intersection of my skill sets that I could help somebody be successful in their business, help lend them some money, make a good return on my side. But sooner or later, I ran out of cash. I just didn't have enough cash to continue to loan. I didn't have enough soldiers to go out to work. So I thought, well, let's get together some money from some friends. We started a little company. We were all members of the LLC, and we're all voting members, and we were kind of learning how to do it. And I realized that was a really good proof of concept that this works, but it's not scaling fast enough. So I then formally set up a SEC Reg D 506C fund, which means I can openly, publicly talk about it and raise money from accredited investors to then use their capital to lend to real estate investors.
So I didn't know that you can also start hard money lending business through IRA. How did you figure about that?
How did I learn that?
Yeah.
I went to a conference and there's just different strategies that you can use to find different, to find other people's money. And one of those is saying, hey, I want to buy a rental property, but I don't have any money. But you go and find somebody who has money in their IRA. And you say, hey, would you be interested in lending me 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever the number is? And one of their options is they can put their IRA into a self-directed account. And not a lot of people know about that, but it is a growing concept. It's been around for 20, 30 years at this point, but it's gaining some notoriety in the marketplace. And it's a good way to get a little bit higher return and control what's happening in a way that you really can't do with the stock market. So it's a way to get exposure to real estate without having to actually, swing the hammer. In fact, when you're investing inside your IRA to buy a property or to lend, you shouldn't be swinging the hammer because you would be created a prohibited transaction in that case. So you want to create an arm's length transaction with your IRAs, and what better way to do that than to lend to somebody else doing a flip?
So the people who don't want to invest in real estate, they can also make money through this asset class, which is like a lending that they can make around 10 to 15% or whatever the returns are. Perfect. I didn't know that. That's a great news.
Learn something new every day, don't you?
Oh, always, every day. So what's your one of the super skill that you have that you use in real estate? Is it like you raise capital, or you do asset management, or you find properties? What do you do?
Good question. So I'm kind of the transaction engineer. So I like to help put deals together. So I help raise money for syndications. I review deals from borrowers. And sometimes we help structure deals in such a way that may not be obvious to the borrower. They come to us and say, hey, here's the situation. We'd like to do this transaction. And sometimes you can make a little different concession, get a different concession from the seller. You can set up your capital stack a variety of different ways. And that's just part of the business that I like. I kind of like the problem solving. No two deals are exactly alike very often. And so you can kind of use the different bundles of rights that you get with real estate to create some clever structures.
So you try to create a creative deal structure.
Yeah. Keep it as simple as possible, but sometimes you need to add a little bit of complexity to solve a problem that like sometimes you need to have senior debt followed by a mezzanine loan followed by pref equity, right? To create a solution for a big apartment complex that you were having troubles buying otherwise.
Got it. So less complexity, more creativity.
Right.
So how did you figure about that? Like, you can do more creative and you can find easy solution without breaking any SEC law.
Mm-hmm.
How did you do it?
Well, have good lawyers is a good way to start. You consult your multitude of counselors, and you find good counsel. You pay for that typically. Also, you self-educate. You spend a lot of time going through the work it takes to read the books, listen to the podcast, read the laws, consult with professionals, and have a kind of board of advisors. Like I have a mastermind of people that I work with that we bounce ideas off of each other, and we use our resources and share our resources openly to help make sure that the deal structures and the strategies that we're using make sense legally, they work practically, and they're always operated ethically.
So can you tell us about your mastermind too?
Sure. I do run my own mastermind that I help people who are trying to get out of their 9 to 5 and get into real estate full time, or have already done that and are looking to scale their business. And today you're talking with a very successful real estate investor who's in the mastermind, and he was saying some stuff, and I thought, like, what I'm hearing from you is that you're the bottleneck right now, and you're a business owner being pulled into the trap of working in your business instead of working on your business enough. And we sometimes just challenge one another. It's like, hey, why can't your employees that you've hired to do these things take care of some of those problems that I hear you complaining about?
Got it. And if we go back to creative structure, can you share us any deal where you use creativity to close that deal?
Sure. So let's see. I've done quite a few. So I like to do properties on owner financing. So I'll buy a property. This could be single family. This could be multifamily. It could be commercial, where you buy a deal from a seller and they sell to you on owner financing. And this is a really prime market to do so because interest rates are now a lot higher than they have been in the last 5-10 years. And so it's hard for investors now to find deals when the interest rate is 8, 9, 10%. So when that's the case, one of the alternatives is to get financing through the seller, who would be willing to take, in often cases, 5, 6, 7%. And that allows the property to underwrite a little bit better. And then that actually solves a problem for the seller. They don't get hit with as many capital gains. They spread out their gains over multiple years, so it's less of a tax burden on them, and they get cash flow, which in a lot of cases, the landlords or property owners, what they wanted in the first place was cash flow. They didn't want the headaches of managing property, and they're over it, and they really just want to get out of it. And one way to do that is to sell, but sell on terms to the new buyer and spread those payments out over time to reduce their tax burden.
Got it. And also, what kind of interest rate are you getting from the seller financing in this market?
Yeah, 6% is pretty common. So 6% is higher than they can get in their alternatives and their cash equivalents. Maybe 7% at this point. Like right now, you can get 5.5% interest rate if you go to a bank. So maybe you offer 7% to the seller, and the seller, or like the borrower, like me as the buyer, the borrower may not be able to get anything but 8.5%. So basically, I play somewhere between what's available in the marketplace versus what's available to the seller as a cash equivalent.
Try to create a win-win situation for both of them.
Right.
Perfect. So what other projects are you working nowadays?
So right now I'm going up the ladder in projects. So I used to do single family, and I've done some syndications with multifamily. And now what I'm doing is I'm taking raw land in the Dallas-Fort Worth market and converting it into zoned, entitled property that can have multifamily built on it. So I'm basically a real estate developer, and we find raw land, we buy it from a seller, typically at a price less than what they're used to seeing for, or more for what they're seeing for agriculture, but less than it costs for us to buy from a commercial's perspective. And then we get that turned into a property that's zoned, has the proper entitlement, has utilities confirmed, has all the phase one environmental studies done, and it's ready for a builder to go vertical with it with their construction project. So that's the discipline that I've bit into lately.
Nice. And are you like doing syndication to raise capital, or you doing any fund or anything for that?
So it depends on the deal. Sometimes we can fund it ourselves with cash. Sometimes we can really get a bank loan. That's become hard to do now lately with the interest rates. And sometimes we'll do a syndication depending on the size of the project. So if it's $2.5-3 million project, then that's something we might syndicate. We might bring in some of our own cash as the GPs. Maybe get a senior debt position from a lender at like 50% loan to value, and then make up the difference with preferred equity capital raise via syndication.
Got it. And you also have a fund at this point?
I do. Yeah, I have a fund that I manage, and that fund is very specific on offering loans to short-term projects, typically land flippers or transactional loans or short-term bridge loans or construction loans. So our loans are typically 6 months or less, and we offer a 12% preferred return to our capital investors. They have to be accredited to invest.
So it's more like hard money or private money fund.
Right. It's a passive income fund for investors that offers a short-term lending option for real estate investors. And we like to keep our money moving. So we're not looking for, a 3-5 year syndication type scenario. We're usually lending on a short-term scenario.
And how are you raising capital for that?
We're shaking every tree we can find and look under a rock we can find to talk to typically retail accredited investors who have money in their IRA or solo 401k or are retired and really just want a passive return on their taxable account. And they're not trying to optimize for taxes necessarily. They're just trying to get a good return, and they don't want to fuss with the hassle of managing real estate themselves.
And where do you find those investors?
So I'm in a lot of groups, and so we find I'll do presentations and talk about the opportunity of passive income, and if anybody's interested in passive income, they tend to raise their hands. So we're in several masterminds, we host webinars, and we do all the deal where you post on LinkedIn and offer a lead magnet and all that whole game, right?
And what tip do you want to give to somebody else who's trying to raise some capital like for the first time?
If you're trying to raise capital for the first time, a lot of people are super nervous and scared about asking to take people's money. And I would suggest you change your mindset that when you're offering somebody to invest in a deal that is a good deal that you've done your due diligence on, you're not selling them anything. You're not trying to convince them of some sort of, witch oil or something, or snake oil. What you're doing is you're offering them an investment to improve their returns on their capital. So it's an opportunity that you're offering to them, not necessarily a sales tactic or a sales approach to where you're trying to take their money and they're not getting value out of it. No, you're actually offering them to grow their money. And if you kind of switch your mindset around that, it makes that conversation oftentimes go much, much more smoothly.
So you just have to give them a wake-up call.
There you go. I like
there
it.
You go.
Good plug.
Yeah. I'm like, I need to throw a punchline. There you go. So what advice would you give to somebody else who's starting new in real estate, like fresh out of the boat?
If you're fresh, new into real estate, you're going to have to use one of the 5 pillars of wealth creation to build wealth. And these 5 pillars are its network, time, money, knowledge, and deal flow. One of those 5 things you have access to in some way or another. You have time, you have some knowledge that you've learned from doing your own study, you have a network of people that you can bring to bear, you have done the research and you've found a deal so that you can go raise capital, but you have to find something of value that somebody else needs. And so you use one of those 5 things that you have access to share with somebody who doesn't have what you have, and vice versa. They have something that you don't. So if you're new, don't have a lot of experience, it's time to go to hit the books. It's time to hit the podcast, and it's time to study. And it's time to offer your time to somebody else in exchange for them giving you some information.
Educate yourself and show the value to others.
Yeah. And don't make somebody else figure out what they need. Do the homework it takes to figure out something that's useful to them. So if I see somebody in the marketplace that is at a conference I go to, and I ask them, you just ask questions like, what's your biggest struggle right now? What's going on in your business that keeps you up at night? And you just listen, and people will tell you what keeps them up at night. And you hear things like, okay, so you don't have enough people running around looking at properties and taking pictures. Well, I have time, I have a car, I have gas money. How about I offer my services to you to go around and take pictures? And in exchange, I'm not looking for make a lot of money. I just like to learn the business. Is that something you'd be willing to work with me on? I mean, that's a pretty good pitch, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. You just have to add the value.
Right.
Somehow. And what books do you recommend, either for mindset or for education?
For mindset is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. It's one of my favorite books. It's probably the book that I have recommended the most. Let's see, from like learning the real estate game, the ABCs of real estate is a really good start to understand how to underwrite a commercial real estate deal, specifically multifamily.
By Ken McElroy?
Pardon me?
By Ken McElroy?
By Ken McElroy, exactly. Yeah, it's a really basic book, but it like lays down the foundation. I mean, he lays it out for you. And it was written many years ago, but the foundation of what he says is still the same. The fundamentals are still the same.
Perfect. Before we wrap this up, I have 3 more questions. They're all for mindset. Get ready for it. So what's your morning routine as an entrepreneur?
My morning routine is I get up, I go for a walk most days. I drink lots of water with a little bit of there's like hydration packets that they put into it. And then I take my kids to school. After I get home from school, I have my meeting with my executive admin, and I set the intention for the day. What are the 3 things that I want to accomplish? And then I work out, and then I start my day.
Perfect. And if you have to go back and restart all over again, what would you do different?
I would have been much more intentional with how I spent my money. I would have lived more like a pauper and invested every extra dollar that I had in either myself or into something that I could own, which is, stock market. It could be rental property. It could be starting your own company as your own business, maybe as a side hustle. I spent way too much time in my 20s and 30s getting distracted by all the consumerist traps that are out there, and buying the nice coffee, trying to get the next nice piece of clothing, what vacation should I be taking? And you just get trapped into this lifestyle inflation, and you find that you really don't need most of that stuff. It doesn't really make you happy much longer than the moment you use it. I'd much rather have spent that time thinking long-term and thinking in compound ways.
So it's just you want it, but you don't need it.
Right. Well, I've been told that I want it by the society I'm around. I didn't actually want it. I didn't know it existed until they told me about it.
So if today is the last day on this planet, what message do you want to give to the world?
Always invest in yourself. You are the single greatest asset that you ever have. No one cares about your outcome more than you do. And you have to build an economy around yourself. And even if that's working a job, take the money that you're earning, save a big portion of it, and invest it into something that is creating equity.
Perfect. And if people have to reach out to you, where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, the best way to find me is on my website, pauldavidthompson.com. And I'm also at Paul David Thompson in most every social media platform.
Perfect. I'll make sure I'll put that in the show notes and make people reach out to you. And
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Paul, for your knowledge, for your time, for your wisdom. And I'll see you another one.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on The Real Deal, a commercial real estate investing podcast, the show that covers everything to do with multifamily real estate investing to help you become an expert in your real estate ventures. We're here to help you create passive income and financial freedom so that you can achieve what you want whenever you want. We'll catch you next time on The Real Deal.